Hello, everyone. Today is October 5th, 2015. This is the Monday Morning Analyst. Just one event to get to today, UFC 192, Daniel Cormier versus Alexander Gustafsson, which was a okay event, great main event. And we'll talk about a few of the fights on that card, not all of them because we don't have time. The podcast works three ways: opening statements over general overview. We'll break down some of the fights, and then we'll have a brief and quick look ahead. Thank you for joining me. You can follow me on Twitter at SBNLukeThomas. You may, what else can you do? You can email me at luke.thomas@sbnation.com. There's 1,000 things you can do, but Twitter's probably the best one to get a hold of. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about UFC 192 if we can. Like I said before, a decent card. I'll rate it in just a second. Let me pull up the card here, and we'll talk about some of the facts. The attendance in Houston, Texas, it was at the Toyota Center, was 14,622 for a gate of 1.859 million, so 1.86 million for the gate there. Some notably empty seats during the broadcast, and for the gate to be less than 2 while having an attendance of almost 15, 14 and a half plus, tells you that there was a lot of papering going on, which is not the end of the world. Not every event can be a huge success, but this isn't a failure, of course. It's just not a big success. Okay, so there were 5, 9, 12 bouts on the card. One, of course, was taken off last minute, Johnny Hendricks versus Tyron Woodley. Unfortunately, we can't get to that. 3 portions to the card: main card, preliminary card on Fox Sports 1, and then preliminary card on Fight Pass. So let's start with the top of the card, if we can. Daniel Cormier taking on Alexander Gustafsson. This was some interesting stuff that went on in this fight. Now, in some ways, the fight. Well, actually, you know what? I forgot part 1. Let me do part 1 here before I get into the. I almost forgot the own rules of my own podcast. Before we get into breaking down these fights, quick overview, quick thing I want to note. Speaking of the third portion of that card, the prelim card that was on Fight Pass, the big to-do was about Sage Northcutt, which, of course, there should be. Kid looks like $1 million, obviously insanely athletic, was appropriately matched with somebody who he could beat relatively easily. Not just because you want him to win, but because you want him to get experience competing in the UFC and wearing the Reebok gear and doing the interviews and just dealing with fight week. People don't realize, who don't cover the sport or don't go to shows very often, it's one thing to train for a fight. It's another thing to train and get ready and then do a fight week. All that stuff you have to do and all the appearances you have to make and all the phone calls you have to answer becomes draining while you're doing a weight cut and everything else. So it can be problematic. So, listen, getting his feet wet, I think, is a thing to say. But I saw some articles being like, well, he delivered on all the hype and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, like, no, he didn't. There's no, not because he failed in some way. That's not true. Just because there's no way you could know that. Did he look good against Francisco Trevino? Yes, obviously he did. He looked tremendous against Francisco Trevino, but he was supposed to. Right, anything short of looking tremendous would have been an epic disappointment. And in some ways, I think he exceeded some expectations. But let me just sort of make a point here, not so much about Sage Northcutt specifically, who, again, I don't have anything bad to say about him. But what I would say is we don't really know a whole lot about him still. We don't know how well he can take a shot in an MMA context. We don't know how he's going to handle someone who can match his athleticism. We don't know how he's going to handle someone like a wrestler who's going to be on top of him over and over and over again. We don't know how he's going to handle having someone on top of him, slicing him with elbows, and then having to react to that. We simply don't know any of this. We don't know how he's going to deal with someone taking his back. We don't know how he's going to deal with someone jumping guillotine. We don't know how we're going to deal with someone who manages distance with a jab. We just don't know. None of these things have been answered. In MMA, it's one of these sports where until you've really seen someone get enough appearances and reps against with the kind of opposition whose skills you can reasonably trust, then you don't know what the answer to those things are. You can make some guesses. You can make some inferences, of course. But what you can say about Sage Northcutt is he did everything he was supposed to on Saturday night. But everything he was supposed to do was very, very little in the totality of understanding who he actually is. So did he live up to the hype? I suppose if the hype is, did you beat a guy you were supposed to beat? Did you get your feet wet? Did you look athletic? Did you have some good finishing instincts? Did you show some great athleticism? Obviously dropping for the takedown, scoring the double as Trevino turtled, going right to the elbows. Sure. But Trevino was able to turtle because your pressure on top wasn't very good, and maybe you didn't want to be very good because you let him off. Like there's two ways to look at that, but I'm just saying you don't have enough reps to look at him and make an accurate conclusion about his ability as a mixed martial artist. You have that much, you need that much. And you're not supposed to have this much yet because he hasn't had enough opportunities. So get excited for what you've seen, but don't go too far with it. He's still very, very green and still has a long way to go. And eventually someone in this sport is going to put it on him. And when they do, you need to see how they react, because until then, you simply don't know. And maybe he reacts amazingly. Maybe he comes out and is better than we even thought possible. He's the next coming of fighting Jesus. Maybe that's the case, but we don't know. And until we do, let's slow down the roll with the conclusions. All right, so back to the fight card, UFC 192. Main event, Daniel Cormier defeating Alexander Gustafsson via split decision, 48-47. 47-48, 49-46. I scored it 48-47, but I can almost understand all of the scores. Less so the Gustafsson one, but even then, I think you can make a case that's not all that crazy. 50-45, I wouldn't take from anyone. I think Gustafsson definitely took a round or two. I scored 2 rounds for him. I'm not sure which ones. I think the third and the fourth maybe I scored for him. I have to go back and look. But in any case, so what happened in this fight? There's a lot that happened independent of what I'm going to be able to say about it from the perspective of this podcast, right? So in other words, I'm not going to break down the entire thing. What you saw first was Cormier essentially walking down Gustafsson the entire time, and Gustafsson intermittently using his jab. Intermittently, we'll get to this, finding space, especially in the third round, maybe the second round. I have to go back and look for the takedown. Intermittently finding space for a good body work on his heels the entire time, often running to then rotate into center. You're seeing Daniel Cormier with a very high guard, leaving himself open to body shots, using right hands. If he can't land the right, using it to hook the head. Same with the left. Not just Cormier walking down, but Cormier throwing the left hand. You saw that a lot just to take away the right of Gustafsson. Like it wouldn't even land, but he would throw it first, anticipating a counter, and he would leave it hanging almost a little bit. Like he wouldn't even fully swing just so he could draw the counter and then either a clinch or just to block the shot and keep him backing him up. You saw decent leg kicks from both guys, more so from Cormier. I think the more powerful shots from Gustafsson, but certainly the more active leg work, I would say, came from Daniel Cormier. So there's a lot of that happening over and over and over again. That fifth round was basically just a lot of that back and forth. You saw a lot of Daniel Cormier hanging on the head and firing right uppercuts, and those were very, very damaging. You saw Daniel Cormier leaping with right hands as he got Gustafsson circling back and out the direction he wanted. You saw a lot of that stuff. So I'm not going to talk about all of those different components and what may or may not have influenced the judges' decisions. I think we can all sort of agree that Cormier, in general, probably landed more damage and did so much stalking that may have had an impact. I think those are the two sort of prevailing factors for him. Independent of that, there's a couple things I want to point out to. In round one, the high crotch lift. Now, this was made possible by the fact that Gustafsson got a lot better about evasion, and then you can say he ran, but he didn't run away and then stay out. He ran towards the center to regroup the fight. He got better about that as the fight wore on, but that first exchange, Cormier backs him up, drives into him, and clasps his hands underneath one leg. He was never able to subsequently do that ever again past that point, which tells you, one, about the hand fighting skills, and two, about the what I like to call the standing scrambling of Gustafsson, which is very, very good. But he gets that high crotch lift, and he didn't actually get a C grip. He got not even a blade of the hand grip. He got like a wrist grip, and then used it, and then and drove him up, and then dumped him all the way around. And what's notable about that, and the thing you should sort of really pay attention to if you get a chance to go back and watch, when he gets on top of him, he has to switch sides to properly control him. There's a drill in jiu-jitsu, and probably in wrestling too. I'm sure. I learned it from jiu-jitsu, so I don't know to what extent they borrow it, but I'm sure that they must have something like it. You actually get a medicine ball, and you put it on the ground, and you put your chest in the medicine ball where it hurts your chest the most. You put your feet behind you and your hands behind your back like you're being arrested by the cops, and then you rotate in circles both directions. You then roll to your ribs, and the key is find where it hurts the most on the medicine ball against your chest. That's the place where you're giving the most pressure. Sounds logical when I explain it, right? You see Cormier get the takedown, realizing the way the underhooking was connected, he had to switch sides to keep Gustafsson flat on his back. And he does, but he does it by keeping constant pressure, rotating in a circle. That was the nice little twist he added to that. Let's see. So there was one point where DC passed him because, Gustafsson tries to get up and can't. DC gets back on him. DC actually passes just by getting one leg to the side of the ground and then throwing his leg in the air and then bringing it to the side. But the problem is when he did that, what happens? If I'm on one knee and you're in half guard, you're not going to get up because you're trying to keep me locked with your half guard. But what happens if I'm on let's say in this case it was DC's right knee, and then I lift my left leg way in the air like a dog trying to pee on a fire hydrant, and then I bring it to the outside. I've passed your guard, and I put my knee on the ground. Well, I've got both knees on the ground. Well, if I've got both knees on the ground, you have a ton of space to work with. So I've passed your guard, but I've not controlled you in any way. So what does Gustafsson do? Takes one hand, digs an underhook, bridges, throws Cormier past him, but not much. We're talking a foot, maybe a foot and a half at most. I mean, probably not even that much. Just enough where you can then see his belly button, and he uses that to bridge, throw with the underhook, and then corkscrew back to his base. So it was a nice little adjustment. Like, yes, Gustafsson got his guard pass, but when Cormier came down, he came down both knees on the ground. There's just too much. If someone good is going to see that space, and they're going to get out of there fast. So that was nice. In round 2, Gustafsson got a takedown. How did he get the takedown? So Cormier went for a takedown off a knee. He gets kneed, reaches for a single, and then Gustafsson limp legs out. Or no, sorry. I believe that's how it went. Yeah, limp legs out, and then they reset. And then then Cormier walks into him. Cormier, I don't think at any point was expecting to get taken down. As soon as he steps in, boom, he gets it. Same takedown he took John Jones on the first time too. And you notice what basically just a straight double. Did you notice how he finished it? In a circle. Always. Why? Because if you run me straight back, yes, you can take me down. We'll get to that in just a minute. Yes, you can take me down. But if you rotate someone on an axis, remember the Barzagar finish we talked about? You hit the double and then you drive them at an angle because you can block one side and go. Running that way in a rotational circle, I can run that way forever. I can then block your side and then drive you over. So always we're trying to finish at an angle at a circle. Did a really good job of that. Of course, DC popped right back up. You'll see something that I want to point to later. This is a point where Cormier is having a lot of success from the clinch, driving the right hands. Okay, as he's driving the right hands, he's got a left hand on the wrist, on the neck, right hand driving the uppercut. There's a point there where Gustafsson tries to match him. He keeps one hand on Cormier's neck and then one hand trying to get wrist control to varying degrees of success. Just keep that in the bank there in the memory bank for just a second. All right, and then there was one moment there where Gus gets a much better takedown. He ducks a right hand from Cormier. Cormier leaps with the right hand. He ducks to the outside, clasps his hands, and then uses his own left leg around the lunging right hand and right leg of Cormier to wrap him up and then take him down and then keep him down for actually a bit of a second there. Cormier had to bridge on both hands to stand up, which was risky, getting choked, but it's a little bit harder to take your back when someone's that big and that fast. Round 3. So this is a round where I'm not going to mention it all throughout because Gus had some nice things he did individually, but this is a round where Gustafsson was getting pounded on inside that clinch and from right hands at distance from Daniel Cormier. Let's see. There's a couple things he did that I really liked. Even though he was getting tagged, he had a good jab going. I thought Gustafsson did. He timed an uppercut as Cormier reached with his left. So Cormier was actually pretty good about throwing some combinations, one side than the other. So I think he threw a kick that a 1-2. Gustafsson stepped out and then threw an uppercut and cracked him with it. That was really nice. So how did the knee land? Because that was really the most important one. What you see is Cormier. Okay, so Gustafsson is reaching out with his left hand, using his forearm on the clavicle of Cormier. He's got it behind the neck, the hand behind the neck. So he's got the one side. This side, he's got bicep control on. He doesn't quite have, two-handed plumb, fingers interlaced, nothing like that. He's just got one hand here, kind of one hand there. But that's pretty good control, man. That's not bad. So what do you see Cormier do? Cormier is really good at this. People will try to get locked up on him, and he'll actually turn to the side, and he'll try and get underneath your arm. So if your arm is extending here straight into me, you got your forearm here, you got your wrist behind my neck. A lot of guys will take their arm underneath and they'll bump it over, right? And you turn this way and you bump it. You can actually back up. There's lots of ways you can duck underneath, but that's a little bit dangerous because you can get hit. But you get the idea. You essentially loosen the grip by going with it, right? Because the grip is pushing this way. If I take that away, the grip goes away, right? That's what you're doing. And then you're bumping up with your forearm underneath it, underneath their arm. And you can bump up behind their elbow. You don't want to bump up in front of their elbow because that doesn't work. So you take kind of like the outside of your bicep, right? Between your bicep and your tricep here. And under their arm, as you angle out, you have to turn your body a little bit, and you got to angle out. And you bump it past, and then you can do whatever you want to do. So Cormier was trying to do that, got a little lazy with it, or maybe got tired, or maybe got overpowered because it doesn't work. Gustafsson repowers it and then drives his shoulder blades flat to the fence for just a split second, which was all he needed. Boom! There came the right. Remember, he's blocked this side. Bicep control on this side, bro. If you're not moving, they're gonna get you. Knee up to the gut, knee up to the whatever. And so he ate it on that one. But obviously, DC scrambled back and was able to recover from that point. Quickly, round 5. This is the only thing I wanted to mention. Remember before I told you Cormier, left hand on the neck, bang, using the right to just drive it up to the, just crushing them with the dirty boxing. By the 5th round, what did you see Gustafsson doing? 2 hands on the right. So before he was like, you know what, you put a hand on my neck, I'm going to put a hand on your neck. That's a common instinct. I'm going to pull you down. I'm going to snap you down. I'm going to pull. I'm going to turn you. And he was realizing this is not going very well for me. Forget it. Let's just get 2 hands on the right, because Cormier doesn't want to let go of the left either. Because once he lets go of the left, he can step out. He can pull you. You kind of want to keep that down. So it's stalemated the position, but at least Gustafsson wasn't getting lit up. Decent attempt by him. Give me just 1 second here. All right. So let's move on to the co-main event. Ryan Bader taking on Rashad Evans, defeating him by unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. In MMA, I have found that if you're a journalist and you make predictions, you only get any kind of feedback if you get things badly. When you get them right, you never get any feedback. So despite the fact that I called this one, despite him, he was across the board at every sports betting, every odds maker had Bader as an underdog. I called Bader, not because it was some genius stroke, just because I couldn't believe that a guy after 2 years would get that kind of nod. But okay. And I think I got this one wrong and then the Jordan fight wrong, and that was it. I got all the rest of them right. So there you go. All right. That shovel punch. How about that thing from Ryan Bader, huh? So how did he set it up? A bunch of different ways, but it was pretty common. He would go leg kick, or he would go high kick, and we watch him throw the high kick. He almost doesn't even aim for the head. He almost aims for the hand blocking it, right? I can't quite prove that, but it felt like that when you watch it. Like, it wasn't very close to Rashad's head sometimes. It was kind of out here, just making sure he kept you honest. And then, because what happens when they block? They'll go like this, right? They'll stick the hand out to make sure you can't get in distance, or that they're in distance for their own kind of kick for a counter strike, and that they're blocking. So if the kick comes, bang, this hand's usually out. They're usually not here. They're usually out here. That's how you have to do it. And so what he would do, he would get them to go here, and then he would feint it again. They would go like this, and that would just open the lane underneath to get stuck. Very, very clever by Ryan Bader. I like that a lot. So there was one point where he was getting cornered, right? Because this fight was interesting to me. Like, when Ryan Bader was going forward, he was winning easily. When he was backing up, he was winning less, and sometimes not at all. But mostly it was stalemated. But it was, I know we don't like to talk about fights like, well, if so-and-so's walking forward, they're winning. If so-and-so's walking backward, they're losing. And that wasn't totally the case here, but it was often the case here. Same with the co-main or the main event as well. But there was something that was really interesting to me. One was he would get cornered by Rashad. He would fake the right. Rashad would come up. Then what would he do? Rashad would bring the hands back down, and before he could do anything else, Bader would jab and then circle out. So get him to react, get him to settle, pop him again while he's least expecting it, and then circle out again. So like nice evasive maneuvering by Ryan Bader. In that particular case, he was circling to his left. He was getting trapped one way, faked the right, comes up, pops him with a jab, and then circles. I really sort of enjoyed how Bader did that. One thing that was notable that Bader did, though, that kind of surprised me, maybe Rashad didn't want to give up his own legs because he thought Bader would take him down. But Bader, when he jabbed, was really, really heavy on the front leg. He would jab, and the back leg would come off the ground. You know, really heavy on that front leg, begging to get leg kicked. Again, now Bader's got great takedowns, so maybe that's what he was thinking. But one thing to note about Bader's jab there, the jab was consistent and accurate, which was good, but it was really heavy on the front leg. In the second round, it was a great knee tap that Bader scored, not even off of a strike. Here's what's so notable about it. Rashad saw it coming the whole time and caught him with it, but Bader's strength overpowered Rashad. That was clear to me. Rashad caught the takedown in time, got his underhooks where they needed to be. He just couldn't strength for strength match him. Bader's a strong guy. In the second round, Evans did a much better job of walking Bader down, even landed 2 rights as Bader was sliding across the fence. So you notice there was a moment there where not just was Bader moving backwards, but he was like really narrow against the fence. I mentioned before he eventually gets out of that, but there was a point there we should note that Rashad was really good about cornering him. That didn't do a whole lot with it. It kind of just felt like watching Evans that you just didn't get a full array of his offense. You know, maybe that's in part because Bader did a good job of shutting it down, but, you know, it's hard to also argue that the 2 years, you know, didn't contribute. In that third round, Evans landed a leg kick, but Bader used it to whip a left hook around the corner. Remember, that left eye was already badly shot up. You know, Bader didn't show a ton of head movement, and it was interesting that like Evans couldn't connect. But one thing that both worked for his advantage and his disadvantage was Bader threw a lot of one shots, right? Throws a jab and then circles. Throws a shovel punch and circles. Throws the head kick and circles. He doesn't throw a lot of combinations. He did a couple of times, but mostly it was single shotting. He would single shot you one way to get a reaction, and then he would single shot you to take advantage of the reaction he established. But he wasn't going 1-2 uppercut, right? It's not exactly what he was doing. There was a good body kick. He did land off a 1-2 in that. So he would go 1-2, reached out, put a hand on the shoulder of Evans so he couldn't close the distance, so he could measure, and bang, fired up a kick. That was nice. And then Bader ran down a double. Did you guys see that? Straight back. It was awesome, too, because he finished it perfectly for that kind of takedown. If you're going to run someone straight back, you got to do it one way. You put the forehead in the chest, you grab behind the legs, and you just drive until you can pull them up and then just run them over. He does that. To his credit, Evans sees it, butterfly hooks him, sweeps him to one side, and blocks the elbow on the ground and is able to stand. So good job there by Rashad Evans. But it was very, very strong performance by Bader. When people talk about Bader striking being improved, it's fluid. His footwork was consistent, but he can still be cornered. He single shots a lot, and he's really heavy on that front leg with the jab. So there's still a lot for him to work on, or, you know, someone who's just got lights out take. And by the way, Bader had lights out takedown defense in this fight as well. But if someone else is fighting him with lights out takedown defense, there's a lot they can do. So I'm going to skip the Ruslan Magomedov versus Sean Jordan fight, which Ruslan Magomedov won via unanimous decision. Joseph Benavidez defeated Ali Bagautinov, also via unanimous decision. I'm going to skip that. Let's go to Julianna Pena versus Jessica Eye for a moment if we can. This is a fight where, you know, I don't know how y'all feel about it. I like Pena's grappling, but this wasn't her strongest showing, and her striking didn't look all that great to me. What looked great to me in this fight was some of Pena's grappling and her hustle, right? She won this fight because of hustle. Jessica Eye seems to me very, very talented, very talented. She did a lot of cool things in this fight, but she just reacts. She reminds me of Martin Kampmann a little bit. She just reacts to people's offense a little too much rather than imposing. It's not that she doesn't have skills or athleticism or a big punch. She's got all those things. But she just winds up being like, I'm going to negate you. I'm going to negate you. I'm going to negate you. Well, okay, that's good, but then put it on them. Right? So there was one cool moment where in the first round, Payne is trying to get inside, and Jessica Eye actually gets double underhooks on her, so Pena pulls guard. Eye tries to pass with a knee slice that, like, Shanji Habero is the king at. Now, I've only ever learned it in the gi, but what you saw was she would grab, she was knee slicing. We talked about the knee slice before. She had that part right, and she was grabbing the near side arm of just Julianna Pena. Well, why? Because if I'm trying to turn and you're going to pull my arm out, what happens to my back? It goes flat, right? So you're going to pin my hips with the knee slice, and you're going to pull my arm like a bow and arrow, and your back winds up going straight as a consequence. Now, she couldn't actually finish the pass, or no, I think she passed, but she didn't have any control over it. So what wound up happening was Julianna Pena got to her base, turtled, and then they went from there. But interesting to note there. In the gi, when you do it, you take one hand deep inside the collar and you grab it. Then you take the other hand on the outside of the gi and you pull, and then you knee slice, because you can use your elbow to keep them down. You can use it to come back and around. You can hold on to the things, the levers and the handles that you need to still keep them flat. No gi, when you're just holding someone's wrist, I'm not sure what you have with their other hand, it's a little more difficult to do. Let's see. I gets turned on an outside trip, tries to take the back and transition for the arm bar, but didn't have the ability to turn on her shoulder, so she fell to her hip. So you saw one part where Julianna Pena gets a trip, lands on top, but you see Jessica Eye try to come back and take the back. Can't do that. So then she tries to Granby roll across her shoulders. Remember, not across your back, across your shoulders. That changes the angle. So she tries to take the back, can't quite get it, falls to the side, and then she tries to roll across her shoulders to go get it. Can't, does it, and then falls to her back. But she at least had the attempt there. She was kind of close. And then Pena got another trip, and I had an underhook, which sort of prevented a lot of movement on the part of Pena, although there was an armbar there the whole time for her to catch. Okay, hold on. Round two. Let's see. I get a guard pass on top by just stepping out, but she couldn't keep Pena from turtling. It's the same kind of thing. She just sort of stepped out, but Pena turtles. I tries to take the back and can't get it. So you see, if I'm Julianna Pena, you see her left hand. She keeps her hips locked down and her hand here so that the hook can never come over, right? So that's the good part, because she's blocking the space in the hand. So what does I do? I correctly says, I'm about to lose this, because, you know, Julianna Pena is going to get her hips or shoulder blades to the mat and turn. So you got to beat him at the turn. So I beats her at the turn and catches the head and arm triangle. So why didn't it work? A couple of reasons. Two things. One, sometimes people just have sick submission defense there and they're hard to finish. I don't think that's necessarily the case here, but giving someone the benefit of the doubt, you can do that. Number two, when Jessica I was coming around the corner, she clasped her legs like underneath the – okay. So she's on the back of Julianna Pena, right? And she's realizing, oh, I need to go to the top. She never uncrosses her legs and then cross over the waist of Pena before the transition. That was your moment. Uncross them and then recross them above the waist and then slide into mount. She never does that. She keeps them locked around one leg the whole time. So when she slides around the one leg. Well, once you're on top, the person on the bottom who's getting choked knows they cannot let that happen. So they're going to lock down on you for dear life. So the chance to get that out was then. And the reason why is because what you saw was she's like, wow, I've got this choke. I want to pass. If you're really good at passing or the person on the bottom sucks or whatever, you can make it happen. But a lot of times, and this is what you saw, she gets the choke. It's pretty good. It's a little high for me. But that doesn't mean it won't work. I mean, there was daylight here, but it was tight. You know, her face was changing colors. The problem was she was tripoding her rear end up so that she could create room for her right knee to slide out. Well, when you do that, what are you doing? You're lifting pressure off of this. This choke is about pressure flat and twisted. Once you start going up, you're releasing all the pressure on the choke. Or not all the pressure, but enough for the person to be like, I'm good. I can last here. I'm good. I can hand fight. I can squeeze space. You're not just relieving pressure. You might be getting in space for them to get their fingers in there or whatever the case may be. And she eventually has to let it go because she can't pass. You know, the trick was before you tried to move on top and seal the choke, uncross your legs, cross on top, because she had nothing blocking it. Pena had no ability to block that. But that was the chance right there. So, all right. And then if there was this moment where like I tried this bizarre armless triangle. I don't know why people keep doing this in MMA. It doesn't work. And then the thing that was sort of like I took away from that was just, I don't know, man. Like I was not over. Like in MMA, you got to give Julianna Pena a lot of credit because, you know, she just had reacting to all her offense. Okay, so I give her tons of credit there. And obviously she's a very skilled competitor. What I wonder is if Pena is more used to being like a mobile passer, because the pressure passing to me was like in MMA. I don't know if you guys know this. If I'm in your full guard, so you got full guard on me, you can pass while if I'm on my knees and you got your guard around me, I can pass. There are passes from your knees. There's a Sao Paulo pass. There's all kinds of passes you can do from there. But generally speaking, if you want to open up someone's guard, you got to stand. Again, not a hard and fast rule, but it's just a little bit easier. Why? Because I can stand, I can drive pressure on your knee, I can get out, I can put a wedge between your legs. There's just all kinds of things you can do that's just a lot easier when you stand. But if you stand without it, and they're not wearing a gi, what are you doing them? Well, you're giving them space to release the guard and then quickly stand. So you have to pressure pass in MMA, and that's hard to do, man. It's really, really hard to do. And so I didn't see a lot of like pressure passing being the natural thing for Julianna Pena. There was times where she had Jessica Eye. She could have stacked her and put her on her shoulders and driven the shoulder into her, and she didn't. There were times where she was trying to turn the corner by almost not giving her back exactly, but by giving a hip and driving into it. But if someone has like their knee inside and an arm out, they're just going to hold you there. So I just don't know if pressure passing is her exact style of passing, if that makes sense. All right, so then we move. And by the way, that was a 29-27 across the board, because remember there was 1 point taken away for a knee on the head. So then you move, and we're running out of time here. Yair Rodriguez defeats Dan Hooker via unanimous decision, 30-27 twice, and then 130-26. I'm actually going to skip over this because I like what Yair Rodriguez can do, but a lot of that stuff, I mean, like the bicycle kick he had, let me know when he does it against somebody really good, then I'll know he can bring it to him. But that's valuable. But for right now, it feels like early stage John Jones, who was, trying spinning stuff and throwing people around. He just doesn't do any of that stuff anymore unless he's desperate against Gustafson or something. Albert Tumanov defeated Alan Juban at 255 of round one with just brilliant job by Tumanov. So like there was one early flurry. Tumanov did one thing great. They were standing opposite stance. What does he do when you're opposite stance? You want your lead foot to the outside of their lead foot. Why? Because it creates the passing lane for your arm to just come straight down the middle and keeps your head out of the center line for their punches as well. So he was always doing this and backing Juban up. It was great. In addition to the footwork, he was using Juban had like this pawing jab where he would reach and pull it back, and he would like get ready to parry, and he was like kind of waving it as a distraction. Tumanov didn't buy any of this at all. He used it against him a number of times. Used it to parry inside shovel punch, counters to lead rights. He'd fire over the top when he would recognize Juban wasn't throwing it with enough regularity. So he was just using it constantly against him, backed him up the entire time. So there was one interesting part where Juban is actually pressing, and Tumanov misses on a lead uppercut. Lead uppercuts aren't your most powerful uppercut. Think about it. If you stand one way, the lead hand's your jab hand. You might stand that way if you want to accentuate your wrestling, and some guys do. But more often than not, that's not your power hand. It can be, but more often it's not. It's usually used to like raise the chin for a combo or to stop someone from doing something. And this is the one that's supposed to shut the lights out. So he missed on a lead uppercut. He just didn't time it right, but he sees that Juban is still pressing, and he was, I think, off not only in distance but an angle. And then as Juban keeps pressing in a straight line, he switches and then fires the rear uppercut right back to back, and boom, it catches him. Very, very nicely done by adjustment by Tumanov. And then finally, he finished with a right kick to the left hand, and then put a flurry behind it. But at least one or two occasions he uses the hand to measure or lift Juban. So like he fires the kick and it kind of lands right to the one side. Then he comes back and then throws a punch. And Juban is still kind of rocked, but still kind of blocking. You'll notice that there's two occasions where he uses his non-striking hand to either push Juban, measure Juban, or lift his body in a direction to create a lane for the punch. Like even in the middle of a flurry, he's not just going berserk in there. He's just creating opportunities and spaces to throw the striking hand. And then once he's landing with, basically being uncontested, then he kind of unloads a little bit. I just want to point out, like, Tumanov does so many things right. He gets the lead foot on the outside. He uses someone's pressure against them by making adjustments within a similar punch. He goes side to side on his strikes. He uses someone's, distraction / best shot against them. Like all kinds of things he does really, really well. Next, we go to Adriano Martins versus Islam Makhachev, 146 of the first round, KO, the Brazilian won. This one's fairly straightforward. Interesting. It was the lead left that Makhachev kept throwing. He threw it a number of times, and there were 2 occasions where it came back to bit him 3 if you count the actual knockout shot itself. But this is what happened. He kept throwing the lead hand of the left first, right? He was standing, I think, southpaw. He would throw the lead hand first. And eventually, by the 3rd time, Martins read it and then, took his lunch money. So what happened? Martins, so Makhachev throws a lead overhand left, and a lot of his offense came from the same side. But about a minute into the fight, Martins was able to sidestep it and then turn him on a not exactly a failed takedown, but a halfway takedown. But he was able to matador him out of the way. So that was the first time he saw it coming. Second time he sees it coming at 3:30 of the round. Here comes that no setup, not just jab overhand with the left, just left out of nowhere, right? This time Martins steps back and parries it to the right and gets out of the way. So he sees it coming, he parries it, and then ducks out to the right, right? All right. So then at 3:17, so 13 seconds later, what does Makhachev do? No setup, throws the left. What does Martins do? Slides back and crushes him with the right. I mean, absolutely just steals on him because he kept throwing it, no setup, throwing it, no setup, throwing it, no setup. Once someone does that, they can just time you and react their body around all the different things that you do. Brilliant. Okay, and then Namajunas versus Hill. So I thought Hill showed better, and by the way, this one went, let's see. Technical submission, standing rear naked choke at 2:47 of the first. I'm running out of time here. I thought Hill showed a lot of improvement in footwork, in head movement, jabbing and getting her head off the center line, circling out to avoid strikes, had a decent outside leg kick and inside space control in the clinch. She did a lot of things really, really well in this fight that I liked, but in the end, it just wasn't enough. Although I would say from the outside, Namajunas was the better pocket striker a little bit. So the takedown was timed as Hill was stepping forward. Namajunas throws a right that just not even supposed to connect, but more like a clubbing right where the crook of your arm goes over the back of their neck. She blocks one side, trips with the same side that she's throwing on, and then takes him down. Nicely done, right? Okay, and from there, Hill eventually gets back to full guard and then goes to this bizarre full guard / knee shield. Knee shield is when the bottom leg is hooking their leg up from a half guard and the other leg is blocking their hip. Now, both legs are supposed to be blocking their hip, but oftentimes it doesn't work that way. It's called knee shield. For some reason, she gives up full guard to go to knee shield for reasons that are not clear to me. So Namajunas does basically a modified Sao Paulo pass because she doesn't have to open the legs at all. She just walks around. There was a moment there where you can see Hill kind of looking for a Kimura, but she can't get it. So she turtles. When she turtles, Namajunas was trying to, was already moving in the direction of her back / mount at that point. Because, it's transition. So Hill rolls to her base. She's on her knees. Here's the funny part about it. If you watch in slow motion, she catches the hand coming over her first. Hill does. She knows it's coming. She catches it. But it just wasn't enough. So when she takes the first step up, what does Namajunas do? Pulls the hand out and then drives it back under super hard. To Hill's credit, she knew it was coming. And she guessed the right side too, Well, she had to because I think this hand was being controlled. Namajunas was coming over and grabbing her wrist. So this hand was being controlled. So she had this one up. She caught the hand. She caught it. She was there. But then Namajunas just yanks it out and drives it right back in. I mean, it worked. It was brilliant. She gets the choke. And here's how she finished it. To your point, she called it a short choke. You can call it any number of different varieties. She had the gable grip, right? The gable grip. Gable grip is here, let me show you the gable grip for folks who are a little bit confused about it. There's no fingers and thumbs in the gable grip. Take your hands like this, rotate them, and then grab. All right? So hand goes over the thumb, hand goes over the blade. That's a gable grip, right? And you can do it either way. Doesn't matter. That's a gable grip, right? She's gable gripping behind so this hand here, yeah, she's gable gripping this way. She's gable gripping, and it was fine, but that's not the optimal choke. So what does she do? She then slides to the bicep, and she does the perfect finish on a rear naked choke. First of all, it's the bicep grip, so you know it's hard. Look how centered her elbow is over the body of Angela Hill. Not perfectly centered, but pretty damn close. But more importantly, when a rear naked choke, people think it's this, and that you drive their head down with this. You don't. You actually turn it in. You make a fist, and your fist faces you like this. And then you put the side of your head against theirs and everything. And some guys say squeeze like scissors. There's a few varieties there. But once they're here, She puts the head down. Why? In MMA, no one's really going to do it, but in the street, they can headbutt you backwards. You just want to keep everything. I want to attach myself to you. I want everything to be right there. So she gets the hand facing her, squeezes her own bicep, head to the back of her head. I mean, everything is super tight there, and she closes the show. All right, so that is, and then of course, let's see real quickly. Sage Northcutt defeated Francisco Trevino via 157 first round. Sergio Pettis defeated Chris Carriasso via unanimous decision, 29-27. Two of those, then 29-28, one of those. Then Derek Lewis defeated Victor Pesta at 115 of round number 3. Next UFC event, UFC Fight Night, Poirier versus Duffy. That'll be October 24th, so a bit of a quiet weekend next week, I think. I'm not sure if it's Invicta or World Series of Fighting, but whatever. All right, I have to go. At SBN Luke Thomas on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching this. I'll post this on MMA Fighting. You guys are the best, and until next time, enjoy the fights.